We've seen it with the bank protests, the anger that is, in Chicago. Thousands of folks took to the streets there. The healthcare town halls, plenty of anger there. Last summer, where lawmakers, as you likely know, got quite an earful from their constituents. Meanwhile, the Tea Party demonstrations in Washington, no shortage of anger there. Vivid displays. Now, at its worst, anger also fuels radical ideas, conspiracy theories. Married with ignorance, it'll yield racism, and in many cases, violence. Think of it like the movie Falling Down, when the character played by Michael Douglas unloads his anger at the government on a road construction project.
But I'll give you something to fix.
Oh, Jesus, man, what the hell?
Here! Okay.
Look out!
According to the report, or according to a report out today, I should say, anger, like you just saw in that movie clip, boiling up at record levels in this country as so many become aware of a captured government working as a predator on its people as opposed to a government working for people. Nearly 1,000 active hate groups in this country. That's up 55% in just the past year. Nativist, extremist groups, vigilantes who harass anyone suspected of being an immigrant, for instance. Not an illegal immigrant, by the way, simply being from another country. Those instances up 80%. This is the problem when you mix anger and ignorance. And so, or the number of so-called anti-government patriot groups who view the government as their enemy grew by a whopping 244% last year. They have ammunition for their beliefs, but what they do with their beliefs is destructive, not constructive. We're talking about groups like the Oath Keepers, the Constitution Party, and the John Birch Society. We are not talking about some of the centrist Tea Partiers or other populist groups that are concerned about a captured government that is seeking to raise taxes and spend wildly in order to indulge the rigged games run by the special interests from the health insurers to the bankers and defense contractors or the unions and the lawyers. But it should also be noted that the Tea Party has failed to shame fringe members who come to its protests, people who tie themselves to the group, and then carry signs with Nazi and racist rhetoric. So if nothing else, the Tea Party is guilty of being a willing acceptor of those who would have violent or racist ideals, even if the Tea Party at its heart does not harbor those ideals. In just a minute, we'll get to the Tea Party's response to this report, but first let's bring in Mark Potok, Director of the Intelligence Project for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Mark, have you ever seen numbers like this?
Not in my tenure doing this work. I've been doing this for close to 15 years, and I haven't seen anything like this. I mean, the comparison, of course, is to the 90s, when we saw so much activity from militias and other anti-government patriot groups. And, of course, that's the sector of the radical right that we're really saying has exploded over the last year. A minor correction to what you said, the growth in hate groups, real race-based groups, 55% has been over the last decade or so. That's slowed a bit, but when you look at the whole grouping of the various kinds of groups on the radical right, extremist nativist groups, patriot groups, and hate groups, it's astounding. We've seen an overall growth of something like 40%. Altogether, those three strands of the radical right are really the most volatile elements out there, and they amount to something like 1,500 groups. It's quite amazing.
And again, is there a commonality in terms of the anger, and do they, in terms of what they express they are angry about, and why it is they choose violence as opposed to new laws and democracy to resolve their issues?
Well, I think some of what you said in the introduction is certainly true, and then those sounded a lot more like, more left-wing populist ideas. But there are a great many right-wing populist ideas in these groups, and even in the Tea Parties as well. And, what I'm talking about is real angst, real fear and frustration and anger over the changing demographics of this country. This country is becoming less white every day. The Census Bureau says by 2050, whites will lose their majority. And, the election of Barack Obama, the first black man, of course, in the White House, very much represents that change. So there are a lot of different strands, a lot of anger at the elites getting bonuses, bankers, and so on, the economy, as you mentioned, but it is being expressed in this just really white-hot rage. And the other piece of it, as you suggested, is that a lot of it also is driven by conspiracy theories. The idea that the federal government has secret plans to put us into concentration camps, that martial law will soon be declared, you know, and any number of other conspiracy theories.
And fear-mongering is a great way to organize
politicians.
And fear-mongering it's a phenomenal way to organize people and get what you want. I mean, it's the terror thing. I mean, you pick it. If I scare the crap out of you, I can probably get you to jump off a cliff. Mark, a real pleasure. Thanks for the time today. I do want to bring in columnist and radio host Mark Williams, organizer of the Tea Party Express, which is planning a nationwide bus tour culminating in Washington, D.C. on Tax Day. Mark, how do you draw the bright line between the very admirable and understandable principles that are advocated by so many in the Tea Party as it pertains to a constitutional definition of the democracy, separation of things like banking and investing, churches, I mean, go to all these things, and those who would choose a more radicalized view or a racist view and hide, if you will, inside of the Tea Party umbrella?
Well, that's real simple. There's wingnuts and there's normal people.
Well, that's not that simple because when wingnuts go to other political organizations and say, I want to kill black people, I want to kill Jews, whatever it may be, the organizer, for instance, if I was holding a Dylan Ratigan event and a bunch of people held up things saying they wanted to kill blacks and Jews, I would say, would you kindly remove yourself? I don't accept people who follow me who are into killing blacks and Jews and women or whatever it may be. What confuses me about the Tea Party is the Tea Party's willingness to accept the wingnuts, as you put it, without shaming them or defining more crisply what the Tea Party's agenda is relative to those who just want to kill black people, for instance.
So that's our fault that they're nuts?
No, it's not your, it's your fault that you haven't shamed them, Mark. It is your fault, unlike the Democrats or the Republicans or any other political group. So you're saying you accept racists and Nazis, Mark, is that what you're saying? Do you accept racists and Nazis in the Tea Party?
Here in Sacramento, at the NBC
Mark, I'm asking you a question, my man. I didn't have, you want to have a conversation with me, or did you just want to come on my TV show and do a commercial for yourself?
I'm answering the question. We have a woman here on a local NBC affiliate who, after an anti-Semitic rant in Sac State, was promoted from reporter to anchor. Does that make NBC? Does that make you an anti-Semitic organization?
Hey, Mark, do I run NBC? Are you a guest on my show? Do you have any intention of answering any of my questions? Let me ask you a question, Mark. Because I don't want to continue with this. You're wasting valuable oxygen. Can we please cut off this man's microphone? He has no interest in answering my questions. Mark, a pleasure.
Okay,
actually, not really a pleasure. It was offensive. You're offensive. Your treatment of my show as a vehicle to spread your propaganda, ignore my questions, offensive, and an indication of what is wrong with the dialogue in this country, period. Not to mention a group that would accept Nazis and racists. Coming up here on the Dylan Ratigan Show, Jim Bunning's roadblock, speaking of problems with America, and Republicans scrambling to contain the damage after he single-handedly brought the Senate to a screeching halt.